Good evening, everyone. This is Mary Alpa, and this is case scenario one for student development and practice exercise. I'm going to introduce you throughout this short video to an aspiring nurse, and her name is Sonia. Just a little bit of information about Sonia. Sonia is an intrinsically motivated and high achieving high school graduate. Throughout her high school career, she maintained a stellar B average throughout all of her rigorous courses. She did not take any dual enrolled or AP college credits, so she is coming into the higher education system with only secondary experience behind her. She has lots of also other strong identities. She has a strong family support network that is encouraging her to pursue her dreams and become a nurse. She identifies as Latina. She's also a first generation student. She is also career focused and aspires to be a nurse, but not just a licensed nurse. She also wants to be a nurse that reaches back and serves her local community. So, a little bit more about Sonia's development and some issues that are very complex and may eventually end up creating inequities and helping Sonia achieve her goals. And there's four categories that were identified in the profile of Sonia. We know she's first generation, she's Latina, she has strong interpersonal characteristics, and there's some institutional barriers that are going to hinder her success. However, there's not one category that is creating an inequity. It's really the cross sectionality or intersectionality of all of these phenomena that are creating some real biases and inequities and helping her achieve her goals. So we know she's a first generation student, and there's certainly lots of advantages, but some disadvantages that were noted and very evident in the case study is that she does not have mature assimilation process into college culture. So she's the first person in her family to go. She's not familiar with a very strong college culture, nor is she familiar with the academic discourse or the language that surrounds that culture. She's also a financial aid student, so she is going to be receiving some money from scholarships, but quite a bit of her financing will come from financial aid, which really means she has to transition into a college student fairly quickly without any room for consideration because most of her college pathway is contingent on financial aid. She also identifies as Latina, and there's some very strong family influences that are creating barriers and confusion to creating a successful transition into post secondary education. So, the first thing is her family has very strong expectations for her. Her mom would like her to continue and go to college. Her dad, however, is a little bit leery about the pathway that the college has set her on. And there'll be more, I'll discuss more of that in a moment. And then there's also some very strong college expectations that she has a first year experience, that she begins right away. Um, and those experiences are starting to intersect each other and creating some real struggles for her. On top of her own identities and some backgrounds, she's also has some very strong interpersonal skills. She's super motivated. She doesn't want to waste time. She has career aspirations. She's wanted to be a nurse since she was 8 years old. And she's also very self regulated. So she knows that she has some limitations, and that is she doesn't want to waste time outside of academia for fear that she'll get sidetracked and not be able to gain her focus again. one of the largest barriers is happening at the institutional level, and this is the institution that whose main mission is to serve students. And the first was really with the accreditation standards and admissions and articulation of admission standards. So Sonia was admitted into a summer bridge program, which meant she was going to start college right before her freshman year. And upon completion of the summer bridge program, she was going to be an unconditional admit. Well, when she showed up on the first day onto campus, she didn't realize she was also going to have to take a placement test. So there's a Texas state initiative that says students have to meet certain benchmarks on these placement exams, or they have to go into developmental education. These two coexisting admission requirements were not clearly articulated, so she was quite frustrated when she signed up for Summer Bridge, thought she'd be able to start in the fall as a first-year nursing student, and realized she didn't qualify and would have to take a few steps or a few semesters back, take some foundational courses to bring her up to speed. So with her admissions directly into the nursing program now in question because of some developmental classes, there was also some very unclear pathways. So how does she move forward? Will it take her longer than 4 years to complete her degree? So this was a perfect example of intersectionality. There really wasn't one section or category that was creating inequities for Sonia, but it was really a cross section of them, or competing, very strong competing forces that were working to cause confusion and a little bit of havoc and making it harder for Sonia to transition. So from an institutional standpoint, there are some recommendations. The first thing that I would recommend, and most colleges do try to be very clear about the admissions policies, is to create clear articulation for students that who are first time to college, new to the language, new to the admissions process, so that students understand what the steps are involved in becoming a new student in college. So placement benchmarks and placement testing all should have been in the forefront and clearly articulated before she was given this unconditional admit, which she assumed to be first year admissions into a nursing program. This institution would have also been wise to do some test preparation and discuss with students the impact of the Texas State Initiative testing scores on their career pathways. So many students, if they come into a testing situation and they're not quite sure of what those placement scores mean, they get nervous or they don't take those tests seriously. And then at the conclusion, when they actually are placed, they realize they're a little bit further behind and they get discouraged. What would help would be some very defined developmental and college level pathways. So after the testing is over and say Sonia was prepared and there was a prep course and there was very clear institutional admissions, and she still tested into developmental education, it would be really helpful to have very clear pathways. So if you wanted to become a nurse, but you have to take one foundational reading class and one foundational math class, how does that look like in terms of semesters dedicated to the pursuit of your career versus for the college student that only has to take one foundational class, or for a student that tests right into college level? So those pathways should be clearly articulated so a student can understand how long it's going to take to get through, what are some barriers along the way, so that they can plan and adjust and make sure that they're financially secure to be able to take the pathway for as long as it takes them to finish. There also, because she's a new student and she's a first generation student and she has very strong family ties and values both of her parents' decisions, many summer bridge programs offer a parent session. And this is really helpful in order to better close the articulation gap in terms of college level language. So, what does admissions mean? What does a pathway mean? What is financial aid? What are the implications? Because if you can get strong families to buy in as a family unit into their child's or their student's career pathway, it's going to make the student feel more assured that they're in the right place and that they're making the right decisions. In terms of pursuing her career, developmental education courses or foundational courses are often discouraging to students, but many colleges offer contextualized summer bridge programs and contextualized foundational courses. So if a student tests into a reading class, for instance, that's not quite college level, many colleges offer a reading course contextualized for a field of interest. So reading for a business major, reading for a nursing major, so that students are getting a closer connection to their career pathway. They find it more invigorating, more motivating, and see more relevance in some of those foundational courses that they may have to take. So the outcomes of some of these recommendations would be, first and foremost, we want a smooth transition for students, especially when they're first year. It's so pivotal when they're making career decisions, they're investing money, they're investing time, and they're also oftentimes competing with family members' wishes for what the next stage of their life is going to hold. Having a transition that's seamless and understood by everyone involved is certainly going to make that an easier place for the student to enter into the college. Strong academic foundations are absolutely necessary, but it's also very important to provide relevance in some of those academic foundational courses, such as contextualizing reading courses, contextualizing early writing courses, so that students can see the relevance of those academic disciplines in their career pathway. It's also very important to have those career pathways very defined and laid out for students based on where their entry point is. So if a student is taking a developmental course, what does that look like in terms of semesters having to attend versus those that test right into college? It's super important for students to understand the rigor and the requirements of the academic community and become assimilated to the language, assimilated to the culture, assimilated to the career, their fields of interest and those expectations. Because the sooner those expectations are articulated and students start understanding them and can internalize them, the quicker they become that student they were intended to be, which then leads to student empowerment, of course. So this is just a brief overview of a very complicated situation. We have Sonia, who is an aspiring nurse who has competing obligations and competing interests. And there's are some barriers, but with a community of support that will help set that pathway and articulate that pathway for her, she'll have no problem with reaching her dream goals of becoming a nurse. These are some references if you would like to read more about the Texas State University overview, or you would like to know more about student development. Thank you.